By now, you've probably heard that the IRS is hiring 87,000 new agents by the year 2031. Obviously, this has sparked some severe political debate, with people on the right side of the aisle saying that the only purpose for this is to come after middle-class Americans. This is leading people on the left to counter and say that for anybody earning less than $400,000 in actual income, the audit rates will not rise. But I'm here to show you why the only reason that those 87,000 new agents are being hired is to come after the middle class, and I've got proof. Ready? Let's dive in. In these crazy economic times, it is harder than ever to invest in a way that makes you confident that you are not going to lose money. And that's why I created my portfolio allocation mastery course to teach you how to bulletproof your portfolio. It is launched now, and for this first week only, it is on sale, 40% off. Promo code LAUNCH40. I've got the discount code linked in the description below. Sign up, don't miss out on this discount to learn how to bulletproof your portfolio. All right, so the IRS is adding 87,000 new IRS agents by the year 2031. Now, the public-facing reason for this is, like Snopes claims here, to incrementally hire these employees by 2031. This is for replacing existing workers who are retiring, like customer service, technology specialists. Just to put this in perspective, companies like McDonald's have 100,000, Tesla has 100,000, Chipotle has 97,000, and Shell has 87,000. Not to mention, the IRS currently only has a little under 75,000 employees. Assuming that most of these new hires would be to replace retiring ones, they would need about a 120% turnover rate in just the next 8 years. So if it's not just to replace retiring employees, and it's not just to have a few more people to answer the phone, why in the world would they be hiring this many people? Well, to understand why, we have to take a little trip back in time. Contrary to what most people assume, the United States did not always have an income tax. The first income tax started in 1861 as a way to pay for the Civil War. After the Civil War, the income tax went away in 1872. In 1894, Congress tried to start another income tax again, but the Supreme Court struck it down. However, and very unfortunately, in 1913, they were able to get a constitutional amendment passed so that they could start taxing income once and for all. And if we look here at taxfoundation.org, they have this nice little table that shows what the tax rates were per year. We can see it started in 1862, which means that this country survived perfectly well for decades from its beginning until 1862 with zero income tax. We can see here from 1862 all the way through 1872 what the tax rates were, and then in 1873 through 1893, for a full 20 years, there was no income tax. We see here in 1894 when they tried to institute the new income tax, but the Supreme Court struck it down, and then again until 1912, there was no income tax for any American citizen. Man, can you imagine living in between 1873 and 1913 when not only was there no income tax, but there was also no central bank? Because if you remember, the Federal Reserve was started in 1913 as well. No surprise that that was one of the periods of greatest economic growth in American history. So you're probably thinking, what in the world does this have to do with what's going on right now? And we are getting there. Take a look at where it starts to get spicy here in 1913. Due to generous exemptions and deductions, less than 1% of the population paid income taxes at the rate of only 1% of net income. And this is how they were able to get the 16th Amendment to pass. They promised this tax would only be for the richest of the rich, and they were only going to take a tiny amount of the money from the richest of the rich. And everybody just said, you know what? That sounds great. I'm on board. And so we can see here on this table, starting off in 1913, 1% through 7% for these amounts. Easy peasy, not that much. But as we start to scroll, 1914, 1915, suddenly we get to 1916, and they're taking a little bit more. Now in 1917, taking a little bit more. And then in 1918, taking a little bit more, and on and on and on it goes until we get to today, where the average tax rate for even the bottom 50% is 3.5%, and for all taxpayers is 13%. And now we start to get to the point of why they're hiring these 87,000 agents. Let's take a look at the breakdown of where the income for the federal budget already comes from. The top 1% pay an average rate of 25% of their income. All the way down from there, we get to 22 for the top 5, 19 top 10, 16 for the top 25, 14 for the top 50, 3.5 for the bottom 50. So right now, the majority of the tax income for the United States government already comes from the rich. Let's take a look at exactly how much. The adjusted gross income for the top 1% is $2.4 trillion roughly, because it's million, that's trillion. Of that, about $612 billion was paid in taxes. Now let's compare that top 1% to this bottom 50%. You've got about $1.3 trillion in income in the bottom 50 and only about $48 billion in income taxes paid versus the $600 billion from the top 1%. Where am I going with this? Let's take a quick look at the federal budget. This is the federal budget, all the money that they spend every single year. And we can see here that for the last few years, pre-2020, they were spending around $4 trillion every year. After we zoom in here, we can see a big spike up, and they hit almost $7 trillion in 2020 and peaked a little bit over $7 trillion in 2021. Now, let's assume that over the next few years, the federal budget normalizes and goes back down to the $4 to $5 billion level. I know it's wishful thinking, but let's just pretend for a moment. The total adjusted gross income for the top 1% was $2.4 trillion, which means that if the federal government took every single penny of income from the entire top 1%, it would fund their budget for maybe 6 months. And if they keep on spending at the rate that they've been spending the last couple of years, they would blow through that far quicker. However, looking back at this chart, we can see that in the top 5%, there's $4.2 trillion. The top 10, $5 trillion, and the top 25%, $8 trillion. The top 50 has $10 trillion minus the $2 trillion coming from the top 1%. You've got about $8 trillion here. Counting in the bottom, you get another $1.3 trillion of income. So where do we think they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck? Are they gonna go after the top 1%? That barely has $2 trillion that they're already taking an average rate of 25% from? And if they took 100%, it would fund the government for just a few months? Or do you think they're gonna slowly tick up the amount they're able to pull out of the entire rest of the population? That's a far bigger honeypot and far more people you're distributing that extraction of wealth from. People don't notice as quickly. Not to mention the fact that the top 1% are most likely going to be able to just start getting their income in other ways that are less taxable than earned wages. This isn't anything new. In fact, it's what the government has always done. They point the finger at a bad guy and they say, we're going to go after that bad guy. But instead, they use it to come after you. In 1913, they pointed the finger at the rich and said, we're just going to take a little from the rich. But it didn't take that many years for them to start taking more from the rich and start taking from every single other person as well. And if you think for one moment that the IRS is trying to double their size in order to extract the little that's left from the top 1% to fund the government for just a few extra months, when they have the honeypot of the entire American middle class sitting in front of them, well then maybe you need to study history a little bit more. And finally, if you're interested, I'm going to be in Spokane, Washington, speaking at the Silver Symposium in just a couple of weeks. I've got the link for that in the description below. if you would like to sign up to come to the Silver Symposium. It'll be a great conference. I'll be speaking there, and I'd love to see you there as well. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.